Hello everyone, it's 1 minute to 2 o'clock. We'll be starting at 2 o'clock, but I just wanted to let you know that we're here and we are going to start. So give us a minute or so and we'll let everybody join and start at 2. See you in a minute. Right, it's 2 o'clock, the pips have gone, and we thought we'll start. Welcome to the Retail Bulletin Digital Transformation Webinar 2020, and we're going to be talking about today how to embrace innovation in customer analytics to transform the customer journey, i.e. how to be a data ninja with lots of different areas to improve your customer experience. Let me just introduce myself. My name's Andrew Mann. I've spent the last 2 decades or so working in data-driven marketing roles, in leadership roles in some of the UK's biggest retailers. Tesco, where I was Club Card Director. I was Insight and Loyalty Director at Sainsbury's, VP of Insight and Analytics at Asda, and Customer Director at the Co-op. And I've recently been the Insight Director at M&S. So over those 20 or so years, I've built up lots of experience, and I've just set up North Bailey, where I'm going to be using my experience and my network to help North Bailey clients. We have an absolute sort of team here. They're going to be analytical gurus who'll be able to help us through what we need to do, but also people who really understand retail and how to use it. I'm going to introduce them all. The first is Gracia Amico. Gracia is the chair of PetMate. But she comes with sort of years of experience, having worked in the digital world all her life in fashion and digital companies, and she now chairing PetMate and also a non-executive director in Stitched as well. Next, we have David Elston, who again has spent a lot of time in the digital world, both consulting and working for organisations. He spent a lot of time at Clark's. And he's going to be talking to us quite a lot about his experiences. Francis grew up in the fashion world and worked for places like Liberty and House of Fraser. And she then sort of took that experience in retail into digital transformation at Matches and the Bauer Media Group. Okay, we've got Martin James, who's the account director for UK Retail at Precisely, and Martin's got almost 2 decades of experience as well, working for large organisations, helping retailers transform their analytics. And then we have Alison Holmes, who's Director of Professional Services for EMEA at Precisely. Alison's got a lot of experience in terms of data management, strategy and marketing, and she's worked in senior roles in lots of different areas around travel, wholesale and retail, developing and formulating data management strategies. So welcome to all of you. Big wave from the teams there. Right. Hold on, I'll move on. I'm going to come off the stop share and you can see the panel in a bit more. Karen, you're still on. Right. First of all, welcome everyone. 2020 has not been the year I think we all thought it was going to be when we celebrated on January the 1st. It's been a crazy year. And the retailers are facing 3 key challenges: how to survive, revive, and thrive. If they've already survived the last 6 months, they're in a good place, but they're all recognizing that the next 10 weeks as we run up to Christmas is going to be critical for survival. So how do you survive in the next 10 weeks? How do you revive in the next 10 months? So coming out of the new year, set yourself up for a strong 2020. And how do you make sure you can thrive in the next 10 years? Now, every organization is going to face those different challenges differently. And what is certain is that accelerating digital adoption and the fact that we've got an economic recession almost upon us now is going to be part of every retailer's thinking. And those retailers that are open to change and new ideas and nimble in their way they innovate will be the most successful, just like it's always been, really. And so as ever, Retail, though, is a series, an endless series of problems to solve. And I think, we're going to be talking today about how data and analytics can help you solve those problems. Now, the difference between success and failure is very small in retail. If you're in grocery retail, if you were slightly ahead of the IGD each week, that was good. If you were behind it, that was bad. And so what a lot of organizations are trying to do is thinking around how they use data. What we're going to talk a bit about today is two things. We're going to talk about the what, so some examples from our panel as to how retailers are using data, but then also, more importantly, the how. How do you embed that change into your organization? So we're going to start a bit about the around the what. And I'm actually going to go to Alison first and talk a bit about data quality, because I think getting data quality right is going to be one of those critical things. And I'm going to give you, actually, let's go to Alison first. I've just been talking too long. Tell me a bit more about how data quality we know continually degrades. Customers change, customers move. Can you sort of how are progressive retailers addressing the issue of data quality?
Yeah. Data quality is a massive challenge, and it's an ongoing, never-ending challenge as such. And there's only so much you can do programmatically. So that there are systems you can use to improve the quality of the data once you have it. But some of the key requirements are actually to get the client engaged and the customer engaged in owning their data and ensuring that their data is kept up to date and is managed. And that is generally managed through key marketing strategies and making it easy for them to update their data. So, for example, I recently worked on a project with L'Occitane, who are a global leader in natural cosmetics and well-being. They had an issue where they have multiple, as everybody does, multiple data sources, different structures of data, customer data, different input source channels, etc. And we worked with them to pull all that data into a single view, validate all the base data, ensure that everything was as clean as it possibly could be, and that we had a single record which linked back to all the multiple different sources. And then offering a real-time input into that data to the clients through their app or through the website, so that they will then be able to keep up to date. So linking that with the marketing strategies, they would then be able to they might get free offers, or L'Occitane, for example, used to send little samples through the post, and if you move, you don't get them anymore, and it's just a question of actually keeping on top of that. There are tools, there are address validation tools, etc. And once you've got your base developed, then what L'Occitane have done is that we've built with them a validation, centralization tool as the data comes in. So once it's in the central system, even if it's coming from a different source, the customer will be able to see that online and be able to manage that. And also L'Occitane will be able to understand a single view of their customer, which then is the basis for their data maturity, which they then will add the sales and the product management and the behaviors, and enable them to actually develop their business strategy on the basis of their customer. So it's been a great success at L'Occitane. They're on the next phase, so looking at bringing in more of the anything from Google data to Instagram data to their purchase history to even the warehouse management side of things. So ultimately they're on a 5-year journey, and I think they're on probably about year 1.5, 2. But the key is to get your base right and then manage your quality of your data moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, that's very clear, I think.
Are they shutting stores at all, or are they? So, I just wonder if that makes a difference, because
it will make a difference. They also have embedded stores within, like,
yes,
that's a phrase, and that side. And this will give them an opportunity to fully understand you know, is it the store that is actually not performing, or is the customer going into the store and then buying elsewhere online, or that sort of thing? Once you've got the data in there, you've got that opportunity and the elasticity of the data, which will enable them then to, you know, in the perfect world, be able to analyze further and understand the data science and overlay with other data, which will then help to enhance, you know, it's not just their data, there's other data around there which will help to enhance their knowledge, really.
And I suppose the great thing about this is consumers will be consumers, won't they? They'll just do what they normally do and find their own way around it. So what you have to do as a retailer is do everything you can to make the data as clean as possible for them and as right as possible, and assume they're going to just do what they need to do, which is keep shopping with you. So
yeah, and take responsibility for their data as well.
Yeah, and actually, it's fair to say on that, isn't it, Alison, that, you know, it's having all that data, but where they wanted to get to is actually being able to deliver that in real time. So it's being able to bring that data to bear when, you know, depending on the touch points that the consumer is engaging on, being able to recognize it's the same customer and, you know, bring all that buying behavior to the fore in real time. So that was a real big key driver for them going forward.
Okay, so that's a reasonably mature business that's going through on a global basis. Gracia, can we talk a bit about PetsMate and how there's loads of innovation happening there, and are you innovating with data in mind, and what does that look like at PetsMate?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what we do at PetMate. We engineer, we make products for pets, and we make them in such a way that we can get a lot of data out of those products, so that we can then make those products even more suitable for the pet and also for its owner. And there is even a third reason why we do that, but I'll explain. Let me give you an example. So, for example, we've made an eating bowl, which you can lock and you can set a timer on with your app, and you can open it whenever you want the dog to eat or the cat to eat. So, for example, if you're not home, if you're at work and you still want your cat to eat or drink, then you can use your app in order to fulfill the needs of your pet. Whilst your pet will eat, you will also be able to weigh your pet. You get a reading of the weight of your pet every time he eats. Now, this will give you an indication of course, of how heavy your cat or dog is and how healthy maybe. You know, sometimes it's actually not only in the humans, but also in the pet world. There are a lot of pets that are very overweight. So in order to get a healthy pet, you don't want to feed it too much. So you read on the pet's weight. Now, that is really important information for us, because then we can adjust we can talk to people who supply food and adjust the food intake for the pet. But it's also very important information, of course, for the pet owner, much more important information for the pet owner. And what's also important is that information could also be very important for a third party, an insurance company. So an insurance company could say, like, well, if your pet is a very healthy weight, then maybe your premium can go down a little bit, because it is a very different ball game from all the other Labradors that are all overweight, for example. So it gives us a lot of data that we can both use to get a better product for the pet, but also we can use it to supply a better context to the pet and for the owner as well. So we are doing a lot of these new products because, you know, it's part of the Internet of Things, where, you know, we know that cats need to drink water, but they might not drink water enough. So we have come up with a ball that can show you exactly how many times your cat drinks. If your cat doesn't drink enough, you will on your app get a warning sign, like your cat possibly needs to drink a little bit more. Maybe you can add a little flavor to the water. Maybe you can put the water fountain somewhere else. So it is really about both making the experience better for the customer, but also it gives us very valuable information of where our innovation, our product needs to go to.
Okay, so using data to innovate as well
Absolutely,
as data to improve the experience. That's classic use, I think, of how data can be built in progressive retailers. So, Dave, if we talk about Clarks is, you know, we know Clarks as a sort of high street retailer in the UK, but they've actually got a big European business as well. So you've actually got multiple countries and multiple customers in terms of you know, people buying for themselves and buying for their children and all those sort of things. Can you just talk a bit about how you used data and analytics within Clarks?
Yeah, sure. So interestingly, single view of the customer, you know, that's a lot of retailers' challenge and goal, and that was one of the biggest challenges I had. So there's a couple of things that I did while I was there. One of them is it's a fairly obvious thing, but it was really powerful, which was introducing e-receipts in store. So getting customers' email details, which would then be appended to what they bought, so that then the customer record would give an indication of what they bought, which then meant we could market back to them more appropriate styles for them. But also that had a secondary benefit as well, which was then half of those people who gave their email address for signing up for an e-receipt would also sign up to the marketing database. So not only were we able to build that single view of the customer, we were also able to grow the database, and that drove more cash for us in store. And then the other interesting thing we did, this was a couple of years ago, was we married up Google search data. So we knew people who were looking at Clarks in Google, whether that was an organic advert or a paid advert, and who were then subsequently going into a physical store location. So we could see the numbers of people we were driving in store. We weren't tracking them at an individual level. We were sort of tracking them at a macro level. We knew what the overall conversion rate was in store. We knew what the average spend was in store. So we could start attributing a store spend to our Google paid activity, which was really interesting because that added a good 25 to 30% on top of the return on investment we're making on Google in our e-commerce sales as well. Okay,
that's good. Francis, look, the fashion retail is very, very different in lots of respects because it's low frequency and high value than grocery, as an example. But again, there's lots of examples within the fashion world where data's been used to improve the customer experience. Can you give me some examples from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a fantastic tool. I mean, that's the most amazing thing that you know, we started from learning what we found physically on the ground, and we could analyze that. But now, of course, we've got such a wealth of information, and that wealth of information gives us so many help points. And buying, and particularly if we're talking about multi-brands, like for instance Harvey Nichols, buying and volumes and understanding really the essence of how a brand is successful can often be driven by the data that we get from the web, and that's phenomenal because it helps you with every single thing. You know what sizes, obviously you know what sizes you should do. We used to do this on a spreadsheet, and it was hideous. But bigger than that, it helps with, particularly in a store environment, in a physical store environment, it helps us with what that store looks like. And the age-old premise that department stores, for instance, and I am talking about multi-brand, will always have beauty on the ground floor. Why? And should they? And we've already seen some examples of people moving that particular category. And then, of course, if you look at some of the analytics that talk about, you know, this is something I absolutely love because I know so many people that do it. When you buy something and it says you might also like this, how many people press that button? And then if you take that into a physical environment and you say, okay, everybody that bought that, so I'm throwing brands out, but I'm not saying it definitely. Let's say it was Fendi, and all the other people that bought in a particular analytic said, okay, I'm also going to buy those shoes that you said. Do you put the shoes next to them? Do you? Do you do it? You know, do you do it on the website? What do you do? And that really is exciting. We also obviously know so much about our customers, which is amazing. And we can really work out the added advantage of us knowing food likes and mindful likes, and just generally everything about what we do, and that helps whether you're doing physical or whether you're doing online. And I think I've got lots of examples of businesses that have changed dramatically what they do, and obviously you know of Store of the Future, Farfetch, and they have created that store. In fact, those stores, there's 2 stores, they've created those stores based on how they want to interpret technology into a physical space. Hugely helpful at the moment, hugely helpful.
I think you're right around. I think one of the things people think that data and analytics does is allows you to make all the decisions. The reality is it doesn't. You know, the idea of Little Britain, when you have the lady saying computer says no, is one of those dreadful things that you shouldn't really do. But I think the way I've always thought about it, having worked at Tesco and Sainsbury's, you know, Jack Cohen, when he first set up his first market stall, where he knew who his customers were, and he knew them individually, and he knew whether, you know, this lady was having a tough time because her husband was out of work and he'd give her, you know, some extra stuff, or this lady like this, we gave her a free apple or a free banana. So that's exactly, and he suggested products based on what he knew they bought. That's easy to do if you're running one market stall, but actually being able to scale this to a level that allows you to be able to see everything. It's right. So it's the retailing skills, but things that happened naturally 100 years ago are just being done at scale and at pace. So actually, I mean, Martin will know this from the vast amount of data that exists. Some calculations would take you overnight to run. They're now running it in a matter of minutes. So it's how you can set it up to be able to make those decisions at pace. So Martin's got a...
And I think the other thing about that, just very quickly, just because of physical, because we talked about physical, you look at windows, physical windows of physical stores that we know, and we know that all the way across the world, physical retail is suffering. But if you have those analytics that tell you what actually you should put in that window, it doesn't actually matter if somebody says, I want my stuff in the window. It's what you know you can sell. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I suppose it's knowing what drives people into the store.
Yeah.
Because that's whatever they come into after that, it doesn't really matter.
No.
Martin, I think there's a really good example. We've talked quite a lot about customer data, but I think it'd be quite useful how data and analytics are used outside of customer. Maybe you can give us some examples about mobile trace data.
Yeah, certainly. You know, and I think that's a really good point in the sense that, you know, whether it's an e-commerce platform or you've got a loyalty card, you know, that allows you to know a lot about your customers. But when you're talking about a physical real estate, and certainly if we're going to the world of omnichannel, where, you know, property is under a lot of pressure, but again, it's that path to purchase. You know, I still think consumers want to be able to go into a shop, you know, try, feel products, etc. So there's always going to be this real need, and it will vary by product type. I mean, fast fashion a bit less so, but when you're talking about technology, there's loads of research to say that actually having a physical store massively impacts your online sales. I think fast fashion, you're talking about 15, 20%, but when you're talking about TVs and white goods, that goes up over 100%. But, you know, where data is going, and, you know, I think the mobile trace sits in between, so like the mobile data that you can get from the mobile operators. I know that's been around for a few years, versus quite expensive Wi-Fi and beacon data, which is hyper accurate. You know, the other side is obviously the telco data, where, you know, you're relying on masts to triangulate, you know, where that device is. Whereas, you know, there is data available now which leverages the GPS data that comes out of your phone. So whether that's a travel app, navigation, dating, etc. So in the UK alone, you can do this globally, actually, which we're doing with a couple of clients. But we're tracking over 450 apps in the UK. What that allows you to do from I suppose a consumer analytics perspective is understanding who's passing by locations, because you can do lots of attribution around those devices, and then being able to say, well, if somebody's coming into my store, where are they going after? You know, where have they been before? You know, what are my conversion rates? So there's a lot of questions that, you know, you won't be able to answer without that data. You'll know lots about your consumers through e-commerce, as I said, but who's passing by, why are they not converting? And this is coming to play for a few clients. We're working with the largest restaurant chain in the UK, and they're looking for locations that are just really, really busy, Conversely, we're working with digital out-of-home agencies who they've got the beacon data, which will provide the empirical data to say who's going by and how many people are going by, but they don't know who they are. And for them, it's about audience profiling. So going back to what Francis was saying, about shop windows, a bit like your website, what content should be surfaced and at what time of day of week, what sort of product. Data out there that, if used in the right way, and this is big data, by the way, if you can imagine, it's like, literally metadata, and being able to enrich it and use it correctly, that's the really tricky part. But yeah, there's a lot of data out there like this trace data that allows you to look at footfall analysis, visitor analysis. You can then put out predictive models, understand catchment areas, network optimization. So there's a raft of things that you can do with the data. It's just got to be in the right hands. So yeah.
Right, you can really you can see how that's going to add value to an organization that needs traffic into the business.
Certainly.
I think the other area to talk about is how organizations use their product data as well. So we've talked about customer data and tracing and seeing how their movement, but actually colleague data and customer data is almost as critical to do it. And I think one of the examples we used when we were at I was at Sainsbury's was we were desperate to grow our grocery home shopping business fast. We wanted, we were growing at sort of twice the rate of the market, but we wanted to grow faster. But of course, in retail, there wasn't any more money. So we couldn't buy more vans or open more shops and things like that. When we looked at it, we realized that our vans weren't fully full, if that makes sense. So actually the vans were going out there and they could carry more weight, is probably the best way of describing it. And when we dug into it, we realized the reason they weren't full was we didn't have a really good estimate of the dimensions and weight of all of our products in the store. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But you know how much a tin of beans, how much it weighs and what dimensions it are. So you can fill the little baskets in the shop and then put them in the van at the right sort of level. So by absolutely documenting all the product sizes and dimensions, it enabled us to really clearly understand how much weight we could put in a van, and it increased our capacity by 10%. And that would have cost about £10 million in terms of extra capex to do it. So, very clear example. Here's a problem. We found a solution to it that actually just involved improving the quality of your data and getting data in the right place. And then that enabled you to grow the business, and it saved, by 10% capacity, and it saved you a lot of money in terms of the extra cost that would have been doing that. So lots of examples, I think, around all of these areas. We could spend a lot of time, I think, talking about examples of what we're going to be doing. But I think, and everyone's got their examples, you can see them all over the website. Some organizations are more advanced in how they use data to transform their business. And some are in the early stages. And I always say, look, it's this idea of crawl, walk, run, and then fly in terms of the use of data. But at whatever stage you're at, there are always some challenges of how do you make it happen. People just don't get it, is a phrase I hear from a lot of people. So what would be really good is to understand what are the fundamentals for successful use of data and analytics in you've seen in organizations. Maybe Dave, you can talk a bit about your work in Clark's.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a number of different places. I think one of the most important things is not to keep the people who look after data hidden away. They need to interact with people across the business. They need to interact with people across the business to understand what business problems they're facing into, but also to understand their language and be able to then talk back to them and give them insights, which then help them go away and do better jobs. So as an example, return rates online, always quite a sensitive subject. People always want to reduce online return rates. Returns rates for shoes are relatively high, probably similar to fashion. But actually, when you look at the products that are being sold, across that range of products, you've got some products that have very low returns rates, and you have some products that have got very high returns rates. When you actually start getting down to that micro level and investigating why those products have got high returns rates, which is what we did in conjunction with the product team, they were able to then go and take those lessons away to then start producing products that would have a lower returns rate. And there may be some things that we could have done on the web as well in terms of the product copy, descriptions and that sort of thing that would have helped people as well. But I think getting the people who look after the data involved across as much of the business as possible is really important and really beneficial. So the other thing I would definitely say is your analysts or your data people, they need to be involved in your weekly trading meetings. Understand the language, go away, answer questions, bring back insights.
Yeah, I suppose if data people are only looking at the data and not part of the business, then they can't help to grow the business.
Yeah, and they also then don't speak the same language. And sometimes when you talk to some of the data geeks, you know, they do talk a different language. And if you're a CEO,
surely not.
and if you're a CEO or something like that, you're going to switch off like that. If somebody is not talking to you in the bullet-sized information that they want, so they need to understand the culture.
So Gracia, you're chairing a business, okay? So, and you've chaired several businesses. So, if you're sitting on the board, what are the things you try and do to drive data into the business, and how is PetsMate, you know, using data in a way that you think is new?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, it's such an interesting one, because when you sit at on the board, and this is not just applicable to PetMate, but really, you know, I was at Acadia and like very big companies, and what does the board look like? And there's a huge understanding by everyone pretty much that data is so important, but how does it affect the board? And I am a little bit, maybe I'm a little bit rebellious this way, and but when I think about marketing departments, I really believe that this has changed a lot over the last 15 years or so. And whereas marketing used to be the pretty pictures department, maybe, it certainly isn't anymore and cannot be. And if it is, then there's a really big problem in the business, because marketing has to be completely based on data. To such an extent that, you know, I'm saying that I don't even call it marketing anymore in some of the businesses I work with, and I call it more the growth department. I find it the most commercial part. It has to be the most commercial part of the whole business, and it can be because there is so much data in businesses now. And in my opinion, the marketeers of the past are now you know, the people who really understand the data and can trade the business. You know, they can trade, as you said before, they need to be in a trade meeting on a Monday morning, the data people, but call them what you want. You know, they are data scientists, businesses definitely need to have, and where they sit, maybe not so clear, but what I'm trying to say is that marketing itself is not enough. I mean, it has to be a lot more commercial, and the weight of data in the business and on the board is essential.
I think what we've seen, sorry, were you going to say something, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's why you've got the rise of the CIO and the CDO, really, you know, and, you know, if you look at what's going on with the cloud, you know, people want to access that data, it's hugely valuable. But I think, you know, what you were saying there, Gracia, it's, you know, it's that integer where you've got somebody who's providing a context on that data, because data in isolation, you know, it can tell you lots of things, and, you know, red herrings, white rabbits, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, unless you can bring it back to the context of, you know, the consumers, and, you know, going back to Alison's point, enrich it with other data to provide that richer picture, you know, that's when it's going to become truly effective. So, you know, you can have data wranglers, but it's the people who can actually provide that context and make it meaningful that's really going to drive, you know, actionable insights, which, you know, is kind of holy grail. You get to lots of events and people talk about real-time customer experience, etc. But unless you can get that data, it's current and it's got context, it's kind of meaningless.
You're so right. And also, isn't it, it's about what to ask, what questions to ask, right? I mean, you might 100%. Have so much data, but there can also be data paralysis. It is really about, okay, so what do we do with this data? What questions can we ask? What can we learn from this? So it is really about, you're so right, it's about knowing what to ask and also having people who then can use that in a commercial way to make a difference commercially for a business. And that is something that I think a lot of businesses are still struggling with.
Yeah.
I think that's why they need to be just integrated into the whole business, so they understand the problems that the business is facing, yes, rather than getting it sort of second hand or third hand. They're there, understand it, and can start finessing those questions they're going to go then and ask the data.
I agree with you. I think though the one of the other challenges, which again comes down a little bit to the data management, is ensuring that you surface that data in a way that can be cut in the multiple different ways. So, you know, it's all very well having disparate bits of data, but if you can actually pull the two together or three data sets together to come up with a clear report and output. And this goes back to actually understanding what data they have and what data you use to analyze different parts of the business and to help drive your strategy. And that's always a challenge because, you know, in a way, it's not hard to get the data. It's not even hard to put it in one place, but it is hard to make sure that the right people know what they're playing with and what they need to give you the answers that you're looking for, or ask the questions, as you say, that you're looking for.
I think that's really good point, Alison, because I think all the retailers I've used in, you don't have analysts just sitting in one part of the business. You have finance analysts, trading analysts, marketing analysts, e-commerce analysts. They're all basically, as an analyst in every bit of the business. And one of the biggest challenges I found sort of running insight teams was making sure that what I was saying was in line with what the finance team was saying. We weren't saying, you know, red is black or black is red, and you know, the same sort of meeting, because it didn't work. So what skill set do you need and structure do you need to put in place to make the multiple use of data as effective as possible?
Well,
I think there's a big thing about the customer, and I think one of the things that the customer, the end user, doesn't really always understand is why we asked for some of the questions that we asked for. And, you know, back to the point, which was, you know, some people will give you their mail address, and some people won't. Some people will give you your postcode. But actually, if people understand that that actually enhances their experience. This is not, you know, it's not Big Brother's watching you. It's actually enhancement of the experience that they'll have with that particular brand. That, I think, is something that we don't, or whether we do it wherever we do it, whether it's physical or whether it's web. I don't think we always explain that to people, and people are very nervous about that. But if we do get their trust, because either of the brand or because they just begin to understand it, it's a bit like accepting cookies, isn't it? You know, now we just do it. We didn't do it before, but now we do it. If we don't, we can't get anywhere. Oh, Martin's going to tell me I'm wrong.
No. I was going to say, because actually, no, I think, you know, certainly younger consumers now where, you know, and I wouldn't put myself in that bracket, although my other half is, I think, single-handedly trying to keep commerce afloat throughout the whole of this. But, you know, they're prepared to give away their data now. You know, they're very clear on the opt-ins, you know, there's lots of logins. But if they're going to give that data over to you, they're expecting a better service from that. So actually use my data, track what I've bought before, surface content that's relevant to me. You think how many SKUs are on a website, they want to go on that website. It's going to be, you know, tailored to them. But also, if you're going to surface a product to me and you know what I bought in the past, just make sure you've got my sizes in stock. You know, there's no point in putting a product in front of me that I can't then buy. But going back to your original point as well, Andrew, I think you've got to put the data front and center and actually have people who actually fully understand it. And it's not cheap, but you've got to get the right people behind it. But going back to Dave's point, if it's used well and actually in context, you know, it can have huge amounts of ROI. I think, Dave, you were saying previously that trying to add that ROI is quite a difficult thing to report back to the board, because let's be honest, if you're going to handle data, it's not a cheap thing.
Absolutely, it can be.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of structure, I don't think there is a right structure, because every business structures itself in different ways, whether it's a matrix structure or whatever. But I think what is important is that those people handling data either sit together or come together on a really regular basis to make sure when you're talking about black, you mean black and you don't mean red. And when I'm talking about red, I mean red, not black. And that, you know, people are focusing on the right KPIs that make a difference to the business rather than just going down rabbit holes. So I wouldn't say there's a right structure, but they have to communicate together and sit together quite often.
I think I'd build on what you said there, Dave. I think don't think you've got to find the right structure, because you could be you know, everyone out in the business units or everyone centrally, you're right, it doesn't work. But I think there's two things that you do need. You need to be really clear on the board who is accountable for data. So if when you're sitting around the board table, if you've got 6 executive board members and no one of them has got accountability for data, then that's a problem. The CEO and the chairman needs to know who's responsible for the data. And then I think also you need to have a senior person in the organization, a chief data officer, that actually doesn't matter where they sit and who they report to, but they have to be leading it and setting the example around where they need to get to. The data teams can be spread out wherever they need to be, but I think you need real clear accountability and somebody that is actually, his day job is to do data. Because if you don't, it'll end up all over the place in terms of where you need to get to.
Yeah, I agree with you, but one of the things, and it was a challenge that we had at Sainsbury's, to be honest, is that these disparate data teams, who I agree that they sit in different parts of the business and they have different goals, need to be working from the same data sets. And I have found that, because there are so many systems and you can't change hundreds of legacy systems, I have found in the past that you might have one analytics team looking at something and coming up with a report, and everyone runs with it, and then they find out there's another set of data. So it's a question of, ensuring that all these people, wherever they sit, and this is obviously the chief data officer's role, wherever they sit, are all looking at the same piece of data. And that goes all the way through from product buying, product segmentation, which product team owns the buying, who are the suppliers, how you sell it out, because you might buy in one segment and sell out in another segment, right through to the finance reporting to the city even. You need to have that clear ownership and centralization and concentration on that data, because there's so much coming in and going out that things get misinterpreted. And once again, then your data becomes your enemy rather than your friend.
So in getting you the right data and getting the right tools for analytics, it's going to cost some money. Okay, it's not sitting there. How do organizations tend to get agreement for that sort of funding?
I was going to say e-commerce analytics is probably the easier, because you can quite quickly demonstrate a return on investment on some of the e-commerce analytics tools, whether it's a recommendations engine, to your point, Francis, in terms of if you bought this, try this, whether it's an AI-powered merchandising tool, you can show how it will drive sales. I think showing the ROI on putting product data in correctly is harder until you get a problem like you explained, Andrew, with Sainsbury's underfilling their vans. But for me, getting money for something is usually, what am I going to get for my money back? So what's the ROI?
And I think the reality is that anybody who's working in business has to have a very sound business case for spending any money. And I think you have to tie it to a benefit, in a very simple way. There's so many people are asking for money. And I know Mike Coop, when I was at Sainsbury's, said, if I believed all the investments cases that came to the board, I'd have a business that would be running at 15% like for like, because they were all going to add up.
Yeah.
We know it doesn't, and there's lots of things. But actually, my experience is two things. First of all, go and find, the example I used in grocery home shopping was, go and find a business problem that exists already and then solve that business problem. Because actually, if you said to the board, do you want a 10% improvement in your capacity for grocery home shopping, they go, yes. It's very clearly a benefit that can be delivered, and one that you can tie into it. So go out there and find money that's being spent that you can remove from the business. Gracia's nodding vehemently here.
Yeah, no,
as a way of,
exactly. And I was just thinking, I don't know about what you guys think, but I've been in a variety of businesses where the data team has only a certain capacity. And within the business, there's always a lot of questions to pull data, because different departments need different access to data, and they need to find out for their own department what the data tells them. And I found that sometimes, there's such a pipeline, there's a bottleneck really of getting to that data, because the team can only pull so much data. And the only way to really get there is to show that your ROI is going to be better than the department around the corner from you, because it is going to affect the business in a much more positive way. So even within the business, we had to put ROI cases against each other in order to get to the data quicker.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the other thing I always use is the Chinese word for crisis, the symbol for crisis, is actually the same as a symbol for opportunity.
Yeah.
So never let a good crisis pass, is the way I think. So we had a great example at the co-op where we used a crisis to drive change in terms of the way people were using data and analytics, which was again a product quality data, a product data issue. So most grocery retailers fill the lorries and they put them in cages which wheel into the shops, and they load the cages based on the weight and dimensions in the cage. And some lonely buyer who will remain nameless decided he wasn't going to bother adding the height, weight and dimensions of a case of toilet roll to the system. So the product went into the system, and when it started going through the logistics network, the system said add one case to a cage, and within an hour we'd effectively brought half the logistics network to a halt, because you had lorries going out with 3 cages full of just toilet roll, and you lost all the capacity. So it was a complete disaster. The retail director was on the phone shouting at everyone. The logistics director was shouting. The commercial director was having a apoplectic fit. But actually, what it did is it was a really good way of, and we fixed it very quickly, but it took 3 hours of, 3 hours in retail and logistics is quite a lot in grocery. But what it did do is this crisis made everyone explain to people exactly what product data can do. So my advice is, look, find the money, but also find a crisis. It's always good. There's always crises around in retail. So find a crisis and use it to your advantage in terms of things that are going. So look, we're coming towards the end. I'm going to just ask if you've got a final comment in terms of where we need to get to. Dave, would you like to give a final comment?
No, I think it's been a really interesting conversation. I think what you were saying about having somebody in the business responsible for data and making sure people are talking about the right things is a really key piece of advice.
Okay, Gracia.
Yeah, I have to echo that. I don't think when you go back in time, I don't think that much has actually changed. We've always asked customers for details because we want to serve the customer better. It's always about the customer, and that should always remain that way. However, if you want to scale it, you need to use data. You need to do it in a more efficient way, and nothing has really changed. You just have to do it in a professional way. And I agree that you have to have people on the board and within the business who have a very good knowledge of what to do with the data and how to get it together in the right place.
Okay, Francis?
I'll just reiterate people. I'll just do people and technology. And
people plus data is growth.
Yeah, exactly. That has to be key. And having gone through the beginning of multi-channel and now obviously the world's moved on, it is so much about, and when your comment about structures, there has to be an understanding of those two things coming together, because we're a bit awesome as human beings, even though data's awesome too.
It is. It's good. Put the two together. Alison.
Yeah, I think that there's two things that come out from my point of view. The first one is there's so much focus on the customer, but just in line with what you were saying around your toilet rolls, there is more. There's more data within a retailer than just the customer, and there is a need to make sure that the focus is across the board, not just on the customer, and then the ownership of that, as David said, is clear, and that there is a single piece of content, of data, rather than multiple different pieces of data being served.
All right, and Martin?
Yeah, I suppose going back to Gracia's point, actually, you know, there is a real movement now where, you know, you have got lots of people who are used to handling data and I think interpreting data. So actually, you know, getting that data in the hands of the right people, so actually federating it. So not necessarily giving them access to the raw data, but, you know, you can actually aggregate data in a meaningful way. And that's where we're seeing a lot of our, you know, larger clients who are actually getting the most out of it, is actually putting the data into lots of people's hands. So rather than actually just relying on a data analyst, you've got lots of people who understand their own data, give them access to it. And then one last point, you know, you might think that you've got good data, but, you know, you talk about match rates, and going back to your point, you know, that actually somebody filled in a box, but it obviously led to a thing. So actually, you know, don't always think your data's great, because we call it false positives. You know, there are lots of really interesting tools and really cool companies out there that can help you harness that data and make sure it's correct from the building blocks.
Okay, brilliant. Look, I summarize this in a really quick, simple way based on, look, you've got to make sure you've got board level accountability. You've got someone like a chief data officer will really help. You need to get a data team in place, an analytics team in place, but they can be anywhere in the business. And you need to get the right tools to do the job, you know, in a very simple way. Keep focusing on the customer and build that capability in a way that pays for itself as it goes. So show it pays for itself by going out looking for money. And then finally, you know, data is not just for Christmas, it's for life. It's probably a good way of describing it. And realize that this is a journey that you're going on, and you start with a crawl, you walk, and then you run, and eventually you'll be flying like the best data businesses in the world. So look, thank you very much to all of our panel. Thank you very much to our delegates as well. Hope you've enjoyed the last 2 days of Retail Bulletin webinars, and I'm sure there'll be a new one coming out to you very soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.